So today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode 70 of this series, and if you haven't seen the previous episode, make sure to go watch it before watching this one, because this is a pretty big spoiler on your screen. So with that spoiler warning out of the way, in the last episode we saw the end of the War of Absolutes, aka World War IV, and it ended with a democracy/communism victory over the fascist front. Mostly. You see, there are still a number of fascist nations in the world, such as the ones down here in Brazil, northern Chile, and northern Argentina. There's also still a fascist Australia who agreed to peace with their western neighbor, and there are a few other countries scattered around here and there. But if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers by the end of this summer. Make sure to join the new Discord server, link to it in the description below, and let's go ahead and jump straight into this episode. Also, hello live chat, I know this is being premiered. Surprisingly too, I didn't tell you guys this episode was coming on Sunday. Anyway, the victors of World War IV will now be holding a peace conference. A peace treaty is needed, of course, to officially end the war and give new borders to the world, specifically in Europe and in Africa. So the old empire offers to hold the peace conference in its capital city, and officials from around the world gather to work out the deal. Everything is going good. They're discussing the victory over the fascist powers. They're discussing the casualties of the war and what their plans are specifically to do with Ethiopia, considering the fact that it is now a nuclear wasteland. But on the second day of peace negotiations in the old empire's capital, a stark disagreement happens. Members of foreign nations not from Mesopotamia walk out of the negotiations, and the conference is rescheduled. Instead of taking place in the old empire, the peace negotiations of World War IV will now take place over here in the capital of Ireland. This is the site where the Dutch and Roman leaders met to try to avert World War IV. Of course, that didn't work out. So now they're trying to hold the peace of World War IV in Dublin. So that conference is scheduled to take place 2 weeks later, and now the world is just kind of in this standstill moment. You know, the occupation forces are holding on to their regarded territories. India is still dealing with any Lime Team rebels that are within their country that they haven't gotten rid of yet. More atrocities are being discovered across Ethiopia. But what is unknown to the world is that a secret conference is being held, this time in the nation of Hawaii. There are a number of great powers there, such as America, China, India, South Africa, Ireland, Tibet, Mexico, and finally Greece. These 8 nations are having this conference in complete secrecy. No other nation in the world is aware of this meeting other than of course Hawaii, who is hosting it, but their government might have been bought out by the Americans. But the topic of discussion in the Hawaii conference is none other than the old empire. But why are some of the top nations in the world, and democratic nations at that, discussing the old empire? Well, moving away from this conference in Hawaii, we head over to the capital of the old empire. At this point, the people of Mesopotamia and the Middle East are celebrating their victory in World War IV. Not only had they defeated the evil of fascism, but they had now united their people under one country once more, the old empire, the Grand Empire. But remember though, the old empire isn't allowed to exist. And on one day, in between the 2 peace conferences that will solve World War IV, a diplomat is received by the leader of the Grand Empire. The diplomat hands a letter over to the leader, and she reads it. And to the horrors of herself, her cabinet, and her people, the old empire receives an ultimatum. An ultimatum declaring that its existence is not allowed. Bounded by the Treaty of World War III that ended the War of the Greats, the Mesopotamian Empire is not permitted to exist, and thus it shall be dissolved. The signers of this ultimatum are the members of the Hawaiian Conference, India, Ireland, China, Greece, and many others. The leader of the Grand Empire is then met with the toughest decision of their life. Succumb to the ultimatum and fracture the great empire, the empire that has the people of Mesopotamia united, the empire that has saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, from the genocide against the Gold Team. The same empire that is now united and that prevents any more ethnic cleansing from taking place of its people. The once most economically prosperous and highest quality of life area is now being forced to make a decision. Give it all up or face a coalition of the strongest nations in the world. The coalition of the willing. Now, why are the Hawaiian Conference members forcing the old empire to go away? Why do they want it gone? On the surface, it may seem that, they do want to enforce the Treaty of World War III and prevent power from ever returning to Mesopotamia, but truthfully, there are some underlying concerns that each of these members have. And those underlying concerns will be discussed in a later episode. But now, the decision of the Grand Empire. Give up your arms or fight for your existence. existence. The leader of the old empire will then take a day to think about this. Early in the morning of the following day, she will make an appearance not only in front of her own people, but in front of the world, and she will declare this: the reunification of the Mesopotamian Empire serves not the interest of other nations, but the interest of our own. Our nation is one of a united people, a great people, a people who strive for the existence of one empire, an empire that ensures peace and prosperity. We have seen what happens to our region without it: genocide, war, and economic disparity. However, united together, those issues go away, and united together, the people are strong. And it is for that reason that we will decline this ultimatum. If the great powers of the world so choose, then let there be a false peace of World War IV, and let the Grand Empire fight for its existence. Let Mesopotamia flourish, for the old empire will not go down without a fight. This message is received by the members of the Hawaiian Conference, and on July 4th, 2025, the great powers of the world will form the coalition of the willing and declare war on the old empire. India, China, Tibet, Greece, Ireland, America, South Africa, and Mexico will all join the coalition of the willing. These are the members of the Hawaiian Conference, and with the great influence that these stronger members have built up from staying out of World War IV, more countries will join the coalition in order to put an end to the Grand Empire. Fearing a repeat of history, the Central Asian nations of the once great Green Team all come together and join the coalition of the willing. Crete joins the coalition of the willing. The Gold Team joins the coalition. And throughout Southern Africa, many of the allies of South Africa will join the war against the old empire. Now, with many nations united, these countries will send their forces to an exhausted old empire in order to put an end to the Mesopotamian order. The fighting will begin between the old Imperial forces in India. Not long ago, these forces were working together to fight against the Lime Team Rebellion and save India. Now, however, Indian forces have turned their back on their once ally and have betrayed their cause. An army full of nationalism thanks to their victory over the Lime Team, India will have a lot of success against an unprepared old empire. Eventually, other countries will begin their invasions, taking two major cities by this green team over here, and this yellow country will also start to invade. The Greeks and the Cretians, in a very surprising moment, will work together to make a naval landing in Libya. This landing is successful, and Greek and Cretan forces work together and start taking land away from the old empire. Here, the occupying army by the old empire is completely unprepared for combat, as their assignment was mostly just dealing with occupation of Libyan forces and citizens. The South Africans will move troops through their allied territory in order to get to the front line of the old empire in Ethiopia. While this land does remain nuclear and radiated, these forces have absolutely no issue with just going around. I mean, that's what I would do as well. I don't want to get any mutations over here, I'm good. But eventually these forces will meet up with the coastal area and kind of seclude this radiated area. To be honest with you, there probably aren't really like any occupation forces where any of the bombs are dropped. So what we have happening here is some of the forces that were in the non-radiated areas being smushed in by Indian and South African forces. I know that this is the color of India, but do know that some of South Africa's armies are helping out. After all, they are members of the same alliance, the coalition of the willing. Old Imperial forces will eventually be kicked out of this area, and India will secure naval dominance in this area around the Grand Empire. The only areas that the Grand Empire has any form of naval dominance is really around their coastal areas in the Red Sea and in this area of the Mediterranean. Cyprus is completely left open, the Persian Gulf is undefended, and the situation does not look good for the Grand Empire. Indian forces will continue their march west, and eventually almost all of Persia will be occupied by Indian forces. The Green Team takes a chunk out of the north and reaches the official border of the old empire, and a few days later, India does as well. With their existence being threatened, the old empire will send out a call to arms. Reminiscing of World War III, the War of the Greats, and the square team that the old empire led, their former allies will receive this call to arms. And to the relief of the Grand Empire, a few will accept. The Farmers Union joins the anti-coalition. The greatest ally of the old empire joins their cause, the Farmers Union. Throughout history, these two nations have worked closely together, enjoying friendly relations, and would fight together in multiple wars. Although different in people, the Farmers Union and the Grand Empire are the greatest allies in the history of Wixo. So it is no surprise that this nation will come to the aid of their greatest ally, but not just the Farmers Union. You see, there's a little bit of fear happening in Europe. We know that the fascists lost, the communists technically won, but there's just one small issue. The top powers of the world, and most notably the powers of the Hawaiian Conference, are all democracies. The fascists are gone, and the communists know that they are next. They know that the democracies will not just allow for communism to exist. While it isn't as extreme as fascism is, it's still considered a radical ideology and is a suppression of democracy. So knowing that, and knowing that the democratic nations are likely to target them, communist nations across their bloc begin to join the side of the old empire. The Farmers' Union is joined by its own ally, Poland. Then we see both Russian countries over here that are communists join the cause. Now there's a story to go with these guys. They were very hesitant to join. Of course, these are former Russian countries. Russia and the old empire in World War III blew each other up. There's bad blood between these two. However, the communists know that the democracies are a bigger threat than the old empire at this point. They would rather live in a world with a Mesopotamian order than suffer defeat to a democratic coalition, much like the one we're seeing against the old empire. So their decision is easily made. However, there is just one nation that is refusing to join on the side of the old empire, and that nation is Rome. The purple team has a history of not being loyal to alliances. In fact, the purple team has a history of really not being loyal to anything. This was seen in multiple previous world wars, but it is most important here. They will not be joining the old empire's side. They will refrain from joining the square team. They will not help their former ally in the old empire, their ally from both World War IV, from World War III. This is a betrayal not only of the Grand Empire, but of the entire communist bloc. The Roman communists are out. They will leave their allies to die. And so be it. The old empire will still continue to fight. The old empire will never surrender. The forces of the coalition of the willing will continue to move up into old empire occupied land. The Greeks, now receiving help from the Irish, will also expand their claims over occupied land in Africa and take over a majority of Libya, where old Imperial forces were forced to leave due to lack of supplies and the threat of being captured. Eventually, the old empire will make the decision to withdraw from Central Africa, with the coalition of the willing pushing their forces all the way back to Egypt. It is at this time, though, we see the forces of the communist bloc start to mobilize and head straight back into war. Exhausted and without supplies, the army of the Farmers' Union will begin to invade into Greece, taking a major city. They will then push down into the Thrace area before they are stopped by Greek defensive forces. Up north, the army of the Farmers' team will march straight into the capital of this former country and take it. This is an occupied area of the Gold team, so they're not losing any of their own land, they're simply just losing occupied land. But unfortunately for the Gold team, they're kind of in a really bad spot. Communists surround their country completely, and they begin to target and invade the occupied area. The Poles will eventually start sending their forces in from occupied land, and all major cities of this occupied Russian country will be taken by the communist forces. Over the next few weeks, the Gold team will experience heavy losses as the anti-coalition pushes them all the way back to their borders. Over here in the east, we once again see the Pink team going to war against these Russian countries. A site of frequent battles between these militaries, the citizens of this region are scarred forever from the horrors of war that they have watched unfold time and time again. The Pink team, though, will be successful in invading into this Russian country, especially considering the help that it's receiving from all of Central Asia. The Teal team will then start to invade into the Yellow team, and back down south, India will begin the official invasion of the old empire. Core territory is now under threat as two major cities are taken within the first couple of weeks. Additionally, multiple naval landings are made across the old empire, more specifically in the UAE area, the Oman area, the southern occupied zone, the area near the holy cities, and across the Red Sea coast. Greek forces, now distracted by their war up north, will be forced to relinquish command of the African front over to South Africa and its allies, but luckily for the Greeks, their armies are very capable as the old empire is officially kicked all the way out of Africa, and now the war of the core territory begins. Up north, the communist nations begin their invasion of the Gold team, and unfortunately for the Gold team, they are simply outmatched and outnumbered by the weakened communists. I do notice I said weakened communists. These nations were just fighting a world war against the fascists, so in terms of total capability, not much is there, but the Farmers' Union will take charge and push the Gold team all the way to Crimea. Back in Greece, however, they experience losses as the Greek defensive forces push the Farmers' Union all the way back to their border. And at this point, a new nation joins the coalition of the willing. It is the Orange team. The Farmers' Union currently holds a little bit of land that used to belong to the Orange team here, and they know that. They kind of want some of that land back. They're a little bit small. So with the help of the Greek armies below them, the coalition of the willing will begin their invasion of the Farmers' Union. The people of the Farmers' Union are exhausted. World War IV war at this point has been ongoing since 2018. At the very least, the Farmers Union has been at war for 7 years. Going back to Central Asia though, this front line is becoming very important because the Central Asians are absolutely destroying the communists. These countries down here are fairly weak, but together they do hold some strength. Remember, this once was the land of the Green Team, one of the stronger nations in Wixo history. So when these regions unite together, we often see the power of these ancient countries return. Not in like a literal sense, there's no like spiritual like power or anything. United armies are always going to be stronger than individual armies. But the capital of the blue Russian country is captured, and the Central Asians will take over a majority of the gold team, forcing it into capitulation. With the armies of their invading nations starting to crumble, the gold team will actually have a little bit of success in pushing back the Farmers Union, retaking this major city along the coast of the Black Sea. They will then continue to move around the coastal area, capturing more and more land back from the Farmers Union's armies as their invaders begin to crumble. Eventually, this Russian country will be forced to give control over occupation to Poland, who will also cut a deal with Rome to give them occupation of their current land right here. They then send their forces into this area as the blue Russian country is forced into surrendering over to the pink team. Down south, the old empire will continue to lose ground against the coalition of the willing, as now we see their occupied area in the Arabian Peninsula start to get invaded by the coalition. Additionally, we see the multiple landings along the Red Sea coast start to unite together, and eventually the old empire's armies begin to rapidly lose ground. All of the Yemen occupation zone is then transferred over to the coalition, and the front lines over here in the east begin to unite. More and more major cities begin to fall in the old empire as the coalition's success is undeniable. Crete will then capture Cyprus, and up north the gold team will continue to push back their invaders, and eventually they will liberate the entirety of their country, which will then begin to go on the offensive, invading and occupying multiple areas of Russia and beating back the communist forces, who are at this point too weak to continue to fight. The exhaustion is seen most prominently in the Farmers Union, who will begin to lose major cities to the itsy bitsy orange team. Of course, the Greeks are also helping them out, as well as the Irish, but still doesn't look too good on this map now, does it, Farmers Union? The gold team will then start to invade the Farmers Union from the east, and they will eventually be cut off completely from the Black Sea, and eventually their capital city will be captured by foreign forces, the communist dictator will be arrested, and the Farmers Union will officially surrender. Now, if you're keeping track of the anti-coalition, that only leaves one country in the old empire's alliance. That is Poland. Poland's leaders will have a meeting in their capital city, and they're going to talk about the fact that we weren't really ever allies with the old empire, now were we? You know, sure, they're kind of part of the reason we exist. The old empire weakened Russia, and then the Dutch really blew it all up, and then we were freed. But in like recent history, you know, they were once allied with the occupiers of us, which was Russia. And really, the Polish people don't feel much of a connection to the old empire. I think the communists here would much rather take the chance of existing for a few more years rather than getting rolled over by this coalition right now, blah, blah, blah. Poland's going to leave the war. They're done. And they're going to go ahead and say, you know what? That was our bad. We're tired of getting split up and ran over by nations around us. So we're just going to, we're going to try to stay sovereign. We're going to leave the war. Am I still afraid and terrified that the democracies of the world are going to fumble over communism and destroy it? Yes, I am, rightfully so. But we're good. We're just going to leave this war, and we're going to see what the peace treaty of World War IV brings us. Maybe it's going to be good. Who knows? But for now, we're out. And the old empire is now once again on its own, facing the coalition of the willing. Soon, Central Asia will begin their invasion of the Grand Empire. And the Caucasus Mountain area is hit pretty hard. This region is not defended very well by forces, but rather by mountains, in which eventually the old empire's special forces will take post up and prevent the Central Asians from expanding into the north anymore. The same cannot be said about the south, though, where things are going very bad. Forces from the coalition of the willing will sweep across the southern Arabian area and encircle the area of the holy cities. They'll actually capture some of the coast, but the Holy Land falls and the coalition's forces continue to advance, now using modern warfare strategies to blitz across the old empire and take their major cities. Eventually, supply networks are established between these different linkages, and overall the front line in the old empire begins to evolve into a more spider web looking thing. And this is mostly just to show you the lack of military presence that the old empire has in the south. This is the blue team, a pretty strong nation, but the old empire's forces are mostly focused up north in preserving the large Mesopotamian area, and so southern Arabia will fall. Not only will southern Arabia fall, but the entire southwestern coast, along with the Qatar area. The coalition's forces will then completely take over this occupied zone and sweep through the rest of Arabia, now entering into Mesopotamia. At this point, American and Chinese troops have been fighting on these front lines for weeks, if not months, truly changing the tide of war. Central Asia will wrap around the Caspian Sea, now threatening the existence of the core Mesopotamian provinces. The Caucasus Mountain frontline will collapse, and troops will begin pouring in, navigating the challenging terrain as it chases old Imperial forces towards their capital. The coalition of the willing will then capture the Mediterranean coast from the old empire, officially landlocking the remaining forces. And from here, this slow collapse begins, as foreign forces begin to occupy each individual Mesopotamian city. Forces from the east will move in, capture the last two cities, and eventually the old empire will be reduced just to its capital. From here, the Mesopotamia Empire will begin to officially crumble, as the coalition of the willing has most certainly secured victory. After months of fighting, foreign forces will capture the capital of the old empire, and the nation will cease to exist. The members of the Hawaiian Conference will then send in a group of multiple nationals who appear to be operating under a new international organization closely resembling the Organization of States. The leader of the old empire is then dragged out of her capital and walked towards a containment van, which will then take her to an airport to be eventually lifted out of her country and presumably to a foreign location. The people of the old empire cheer her on as she's escorted, but then all of a sudden, an older man from the crowd jumps out and assassinates the leader. The military group that was escorting the leader of the old empire quickly retaliate, ending the life of the man who assassinated the final leader of the old empire. The plan to take her to a foreign nation is then cancelled, and instead, the coalition of the willing agree to have a state-ran funeral for her, of which hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of old Imperial citizens will attend, as their great leader who fought for their empire and their freedom is laid to rest. From here, the Hawaiian Conference will then go public, other nations of the world will soon learn about the decision made, and the peace conference of World War IV can finally be held between the democracies, the communists, and the fascists. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. What If Civilization Started Over is about to enter into a new era. An era not seen in Wixo before, an era that will completely change the series. If you guys are excited for it, let me know in the comments below, let me know in the live chat right now. I do want to say, join the new Discord server if you haven't already, link to it in the description, and also, most importantly, please make sure to show up to the live stream happening tomorrow, Monday, June 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There will be a live stream where we're going to make some changes to the Wixo map, not this map, but the map before World War IV, because I'm going to use that map to draw the new borders, and this map will cease to exist. But the main point of that live stream is not that, but there's going to be a very, very big announcement towards the beginning of the stream. So even if you can't watch all of the stream, do make sure to show up for the beginning of it to see that announcement. You're not going to want to miss it. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all in that stream tomorrow. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Serminator, IC Static FN, CTG on YT, Ixco, Euroball, Augusto, A Norwegian, RS, Gail Martinez, America and Canada and UK, Zaylance, the leader of the AZO, Freezioi, Laser Taze, Pablo Sigma Cat, Death Strider X, Hammer Toad 45, and of course, DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys.